Alright, what is up everybody? Aaron Gazinski here. Now if you guys don't know, I'm the owner of Wayward Powersports Sales and Service in Niagara Falls, New York. So I'm doing some reading on this blog post that I see, and I thought to myself, why not film a reaction video to this blog? Because I'm reading it, and I had to stop because I'm actually tripping at some of the responses by some shops. Stay tuned, because some of the things that you're going to hear in these responses from shops are absolutely crazy. So the website, I'll put the link in the description. Full rights to Paul Olson, DIY, MotoFix. How much does it cost to do a bottom end or full engine rebuild on a 4-stroke engine dirt bike? Now right off the bat, at Wayward Powersports, we fix, rebuild, full engine service dirt bikes, 2-stroke, 4-stroke motors. We're gonna go through this and I'm gonna give you my reactions. Starting off, how much does it cost in total to rebuild the bottom end of your 4-stroke dirt bike engine? This is a topic that I see over and over again, and I decided to take it head on. A few more questions need to be asked before we can properly answer how much it costs to rebuild. Fair enough. Are you going to let your wallet get roosted at the shop and trust that the mechanic does their job? Or are you going to brave the toolbox and do the rebuild yourself? A lot of you guys will call me. You say, well, you know, I had a buddy rebuild it. Now it doesn't start. So be careful with that kind of stuff. You guys really got to know like who you're having rebuild your stuff, because it's some life-altering, life-changing events that can happen if something's done wrong. So super important to have it done the right way. So the plan is that he calls 8 shops, just to kind of sum it up for you guys real quick here. Paul Olson calls 8 shops, different regions of the United States. He calls OEM shop, non-OEM shop. Regions he focused on were Midwest, South, East Coast, and West Coast. Found him on Google Maps, going off the 5-star rating scale. Highest rated websites are the ones that he called. So the scenario is he's going to call, tell him that he has a 2006 CRF 450 with 200 hours on it, which is quite a lot if it's never been rebuilt. He'll ask if the bottom end needs to be replaced and what a full rebuild is going to cost. Starting off with Midwest OEM. Calls. The service department asked a few questions about the top end and if there was ever any damage to the bike, and then they inquired if he just wanted the top end freshened up. Paul says no, there was no damage to the bike. Asked again that the engine, since the engine had so many hours, he was worried about how long the bottom end would last. Midwest OEM puts him on hold for 10 seconds, says that a full rebuild would be very, very expensive, many hundreds of dollars. Asks for his name and number, says he would get back to him. It's been over 15 days and the shop still hasn't returned my call. 15 days is quite a lot of time. Obviously sounds like they don't want to rebuild the motor. If it was something that they were confident and capable of doing, I feel like they would have returned their call, unless they're just too booked and too busy, which at that point you still let them know. West OEM tells them 200 hours on an 06 CRF 450. The service manager on the phone says not necessary when questioned if crank bearings need to be replaced. Says, I've got an 02 myself and it has the original crank in it. He then went on to assure me that all the problems come from top end stuff. Valves and pistons, not crankshafts. So apparently problems don't come from crankshafts now. They just don't wear out. They never wear out, apparently. But then he immediately contradicted himself and told me that somehow he knew, that someone he knew blew a crankshaft out. To quote, but predict it and just throw a crank in because of maintenance. That's all up to you. With a valve adjustment, we could tell what shim sizes are needed to adjust the valves, and from there tell you how much wear and tear is on the top end. To put it simple for you guys, valve adjustments are never just a valve adjustment. I've had one instance in service history that I've been doing rebuilds and engines for, where one time a kid came to me and his friend tried to adjust his valves and did it horribly wrong, and I redid it. 99% of the time when it's a valve adjustment, it needs new valves. A lot of times those intake valves wear, they have a hard stellite coating on the valve face. The face wears off and the margin decreases, the valves shrink up into the head and close the intake valve clearance. So a lot of times you'll see guys that buy a running bike off on Facebook Marketplace or something, and a half hour later it won't start up again because the seller will re-shim it, get it to run, and it just wears out again. So that's, a big problem. He then told me that the piston needed to be replaced every 15 hours of riding. 15 hours of riding is quite a lot, unless you're running an extremely high compression piston and dome cylinder head, on two-stroke applications that, you're burning stuff up quick. So usually that's very quick. I mean, I would say 40-50 hours for a piston replacement, depending on how hard you ride. 15 hours is awfully quick. Now this is one that I liked, a quote from West OEM. If the air filter isn't properly maintained, it has a little rip in it or gets a little dirt in it that wears those valves out. You can have a bad air filter maintenance and wear those valves out in one ride because they are titanium and hard coated. Once that hard coating wears out, then the valve wears out extremely fast. So if the engine ingests a little bit of dust or dirt, then the valves can go away pretty quick. I'm talking about the valve face getting worn up into the valve seat, and the stem now is higher up, closing that valve clearance. So that's when most guys would re-shim to get it to run, and that doesn't start again. So here's another one. South OEM. Service manager was out to lunch. Message was left, but my call was never returned. East OEM talks about his concerns about the 200-hour motor. Asked if the crank would need to be replaced. The shop told me right off the bat that you never need to touch the bottom end on a 4-stroke. That is absolutely false. 200 hours, I would want to take the top end off. I would want to look at that crankshaft, inspect the lateral clearance. Usually there's a spec from 0.023 inches to 0.040 inches of clearance. And being that it's 200 hours, I would want to put a crankshaft in just for peace of mind. I asked again just to be sure and brought up the fact that I knew some 2-strokes could come out of true. And he assured me, nope, that's the beauty of having a 4-stroke. So then I asked concerns about piston replacement and the valves, to which he replied, valves, yeah, not so much replacing them, just making sure they are in spec. The guy says, the service manager says it would cost around $160 each time or $200 if the shims need replacing. This service involves disassembling the head and using a valve guide gauge to check the diameter of each valve guide. So he's saying that at least every 10 hours of riding, the guy needs to bring the bike to him, have the top end taken apart, the head off, all the valves removed, and a valve guide inspection every 10 hours. No, that's not how that works. Cue my mind exploding. He then went on to tell me that if I just bought it, I need to get it done regardless, because if something is in there, I think something in there is aluminum on the older models, and they heat up and not hold up, and then you get the cherry red exhaust pipe. That'll end up messing your head. He also informed me that the newer ones were made with magnesium and tougher things. So, magnesium is softer than aluminum, has a lower melting point, and unless combined with another alloy, would never be used for any part of a cylinder head, by the way, which is true. So I asked him about piston replacement, to which he replied, now that's one of the things like the crank. Being that it's a 4-stroke, it is not taking a beating like the 2-stroke bikes. You leave that alone. If it goes, then that's something that happens, but there's no replacing those either. It's mainly all valve jobs on that thing. Extremely false. The piston will wear... This is terribly wrong. you do have to replace the piston on a 4-stroke engine, just like any other engine. At a certain service interval, at a certain amount of time, the piston's going to wear depending on how hard you ride it. There's a lot of factors that can go on. How often are you changing your oil, this and that. How much dirt are you ingesting? Is there a rip in your air filter? So that's going to play a big role into it, but most definitely pistons and piston rings need to be replaced. It's actually amazing to me that a lot of these guys are giving out this kind of information. I feel bad because like a lot of you guys out here don't really know the ins and outs of this kind of stuff, and that's completely okay. You just want to go ride. So, you gotta really understand who you're talking to when you're asking these kind of questions, because I don't want to see you guys get screwed over. So I feel like the folks answering the phones at the shop feel like they have to give you some advice, right or wrong, when it would be much preferred if they just admitted that they don't actually know, which is true. If there's a question that I'm asked that I don't know, I'm going to be honest and tell you guys. So, but I'm going to figure it out. That's the whole point of life. The advice on never changing the piston is wrong. The head does not need to be taken off every 10 hours to check the valve guide bores. And I'm 100% certain magnesium is not the saving grace for newer Honda cylinder heads. Very true, Paul. As I wrote in one of my previous posts about service intervals, offering specific advice on when to service a particular part is difficult. It was refreshing not to hear every 15 hours or never replace the piston. Whether every 40 hours is right or not would require further information on the experience level of the past racer. Very true. The cost to rebuild the top end sounded like a competitive price, especially if any head work was going to be done. And that head price was around $750, which is true. At Wayward Power Sports, I charge $850 for a top end rebuild, but that includes head work, valve replacement, valve seat cutting, which is usually an add-on at shops, but that's included in the price if it needs to be done. So, conclusion on the shops: as you can see, the information provided by the various shops was sporadic, lukewarm, and in some cases, plain wrong. It's a complete shock to me, and I have to be honest and say that I expected a little bit more out of these shops, OEM and non-OEM alike. I assume that the training of those running and working in these establishments was to a high enough level that the only thing that would vary would be the cost of a particular service. And that's true, man. Like, I can't even believe that some of these shops were saying that the crankshaft never needs to be replaced, the piston never needs to be replaced. Like, that's all shit that's going to wear down in your motor. And I don't know where these guys are getting their information from, but it's a wearable part. It's going to be needed to be replaced. However frequent that is, depending on the type of riding that you're doing. So it all comes down to the type of questions that your service manager or the shop that you go to is, asking the right questions. And for a lot of you guys that aren't in the New York area, Western New York area, you're not going to be able to come to me unless you're willing to travel. But it's important that you guys ask the right questions, and it's important you guys can truly trust who you're going to with your services and things like that. So that's going to conclude the review video. Actually shocked by the responses to these shops, but at the end of the day, I don't want to see you guys get screwed. So make sure you know who you're going to. Make sure you trust who you're going to. For more information about Wayward Power Sports, please give us a call at 716-930-2109. I'll leave the website down below. Go check us out, and until next time, I will see you guys. Peace.